Okay, I'm going to call to order the education meeting for today. If everyone could please take their seats. And I'll ask the committee secretary to please call the roll.
Senator Buck? Here. Senator Oñate? Senator Flores? Senator Hammond? Senator Neal? Senator Titus? Chair Lane?
Everyone is present and accounted for. And so we'll move right into our agenda today. We're so excited. We're sad that Alex is not well today and couldn't be with us. But we're excited to have Tammy Hansler, the CEO and State Director of Communities and Schools, here to do a presentation on the integrated student supports in Clark, Elko, Humboldt, and Washoe County school districts. And so welcome, and please come to the table and begin when you're ready.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tammy Hansler, TAMIHANCE-LEHR, and I am the proud CEO and State Director for Communities and Schools of Nevada. As you heard, we are in 92 of our Title I and high need schools across Nevada. We are in the Clark, Washoe, Elko, and Humboldt communities, and we provide integrated student supports, or what you also might have heard as wraparound services. So I want to just give a quick connection to current priorities and kind of where we stand today. None of this is going to be shocking to certainly any of you, but just really want to kind of lift up three certain areas. First and foremost, we've certainly seen an increase in chronic absenteeism and reduced academic engagement as our students have come back from the pandemic and school building closures. We've had historic rates of vacancies amongst teachers and support professionals, and we all know having more caring adults on campus is what's best for our kids, and that is certainly a big priority for communities and schools in that relationship with a one-to-one caring adult. And last but certainly not least, the crisis of mental health and well-being issues among our youth has really seen a surge in the last few years, especially the need for social emotional supports, and that is a core belief of communities and schools. So when we talk about wraparound supports, we make the case for us. Let's talk a little bit about why we're here and how this happened. So you'll hear me talk a little bit about either Title I schools or high need schools. We use these words interchangeably because sometimes it's hard to differentiate a Title I school from a high need school. But for all intents and purposes, 9 out of 10 of Nevada's public schools are Title I eligible, which means that at least 40% of the student population qualifies for free and reduced lunch, which we know is the federal indicator for students living at or below the poverty line. There are barriers to access for necessary supports and services that cause some of the systemic issues I listed above. And our communities of color and low-income families are disproportionately experience these inequities within the public education and the social services network. There's lack of resources available both in public education and health and human services. That's one of the things that communities and schools really strives to make sure that we're bringing into a school building. We know the rise of inflation definitely is impacting our families, and that certainly rolls down to our students. And although there seems to be a lot of services, we know there's a lot of services, especially in our urban core, they're decentralized. They're hard to navigate. A lot of our families aren't sure where to go, how to go, and there's a lot of barriers for that access. And we know, and we've been doing this work nationally for 45 years and in Nevada for almost 20 years. The solution is a one-to-one relationship with a caring adult on a school campus. A lot of times that's a teacher, that can be administrator, but when you put communities and schools on a campus, we bring exactly that, our community into our school buildings to make sure that every student has the opportunity to succeed. So we're serving students across Nevada. Let me break that down just a little bit for you. We were founded in 2004 with one school in Martinez Elementary in Clark County, which we're proudly still in today. That now has grown to 92 schools across 4 school districts. In Southern Nevada, we're in 65 schools. In Western Nevada, we're in 13. In Northeastern Nevada, in 14. And let me clarify, when we talk about the schools that we're in, although sometimes we are called a dropout prevention organization, we like to say we're a stay-in-school organization, which is the exact reason why you would find us in elementary schools, in middle schools, and in high schools, because we want to make sure that our students have that network of support from the minute they walk into a skilled building throughout their entire education career. We have 174 full-time CIS employees across the state, which serves over 90,000 of our students with Tier 1 supports and about 5,000 case-managed students with Tiers 2 and 3. Which I will explain to you in just a minute. Even though we are projected to grow into 30 more schools over the next 2 academic years, we added 14 schools this school year. We're projected to grow into another 30 schools. We still have a very, very high wait list for schools that are calling us and asking to put a communities and schools on their campus. Here's our approach. We're an evidence-based intervention nationally in 26 states in the District of Columbia. The first thing that we do is our full-time site coordinator that goes to that school every single day, employed by communities and schools, but goes on a school campus every day. We do a needs assessment. We meet with the principal, we meet with staff, maybe the MTSS staff, the multi-tiered system of support staff, and we analyze what are the needs of the school. Do we need to focus on attendance? Do we need to focus on behavior? Do we need to focus on coursework? What are the supports that we have on campus? And what are some of the other supports that might be around the community that we haven't utilized in its deepest capacity, and how can we bring them on a school campus? Maybe the school's in a food desert and we need to bring in like a grocery giveaway. Maybe there's not a lot of mental health access, and so we maybe need to work with and create some mental health from a virtual standpoint. We do that assessment with our partners, our school partners, and then we create a school support plan. 92 schools means we have 92 school support plans. Each individual, the school support plan in Elko certainly looks different than one that we have in Winnemucca or Wendover or Henderson or in Reno or in Las Vegas. Because even though our model is structured in a way that gets results, it's also nimble in a way that we can meet the needs of the students right where they are on that school campus. So we do a school student support plan, and we create 3 tiers of supports. Tier 1 is that first school support plan. So every school each year decides if they're going to focus on attendance, behavior, coursework, or social emotional. And then we work very, very closely to create a plan for the entire school year for the entire student body. Those are Tier 1 supports, also look like a resource room. So our school resource rooms are either a classroom or a portable on a campus, and that's filled with all sorts of supplies. School supplies, coats, gloves. Sometimes our resource rooms have washers and dryers. Whatever our students need that they can't come to school and be successful, that is what we have in a school resource room. Tiers 2 and 3 are for our case managed students. So every site coordinator on a school campus case manages about 50 to 55 students on their caseload every single year. And every one of those students has a goal. The goal is either improve their attendance, their behavior, their coursework, or their coursework. Might be a social emotional goal. Maybe they need to work on some anger, some different things that's going on at home. That case managed support establishes trust. And that trust continues to evolve over time and make sure our students have what they need to succeed. Every one of our case managed students also needs either the parent or the guardian's approval to be a case managed student. So the work that we're doing with our student automatically extends into that family unit. Maybe some of the things that are going on in the family, how can we help them? Maybe they need help with accessing some housing. Maybe their power's been turned off. Maybe there's some mental health supports that's needed. So we work with the families, and we also work with everybody on a school campus to make sure that we're bringing the needs. So if there's a counselor or a social worker or another provider, we're working with them as well, because we certainly cannot do this work alone. I'm going to show you a quick video that's going to prove setting the stage for this video. This is our national organization that produced this, and they reunited site coordinators with some of their case managed students a few years later.
When did you realize that everything would be okay for you? Ooh, I like that question.
Oh, wow. Oh, man.
What about me makes you proud?
What was the best memory of high school?
It was finding communities and schools.
What was your first impression of me when we met?
Oh my goodness, you were so little and sweet.
You were one of the first students I met when I started with communities and schools. So I think I was a little overwhelmed at first when I met you.
Ooh, this one better be great, okay? What makes you proud about me?
Okay, anyway. But so many people give up, like, so they're one step away from their dreams coming true. And I've seen people do that all throughout my life. And to watch you arrive at each one of your dreams and like kick the front door in, you know what I'm saying? Like, that makes me so proud of you.
My turn. What were the challenges you were facing when you met me?
At that time, I don't know if I told you, but I live in a 2-bed, 1-bath house with a multifamily structure. So it was my parents, my mom and dad, my 4 siblings, including me, my aunt and her 3 children, and my grandparents.
I was just lost. I was depressed. I was lost. I was angry.
One of the challenges in that time was my ex-boyfriend. Right, yeah.
Communities and schools is amazing, but like, you're the reason why. You know what I'm saying? It's you. It's specifically you.
You changed my life. You gave me lots of hope, lots of hope for the future.
Community school is full of chosen people with pure hearts.
If this was to be our very last conversation, what would you want me to know?
Thank you for teaching me how to handle stress, how to handle struggles. Thank you for realizing something I didn't have and you saw in me. Thank you for being there.
Thank you for everything. To actually go to college and know that I could do it and be somebody in this world, like there's actually nobody ever that's been there for me, like consistently, you know, and I would honestly have to say thank you, you know, and I love you so much.
Thanks for allowing us to share that one-to-one relationship with a caring adult. I've seen it probably dozens of times, and I still get teared up every time I see it. We don't do this work alone. We collaborate with over 120 partners across the state of Nevada. That's the whole goal of communities and schools, is to bring the community into our schools, making sure that our students have what they need to succeed, and that extends into their families. So whether that be the Food Bank of Northern Nevada, would be UNLV's The Practice, which we proudly have had a telehealth, mental health counseling program for our students 13 years and over in the Elko County school districts for 5 or 6 years. We've just expanded that into our Winnemucca community and expanded that partnership with UNLV's The Practice as well. 120 partners, making sure that we're doing everything we can to support our kids, our educators, our teachers, our administrators, and make schools the safe places that we know that they can be. We're an evidence-based intervention, and we're very proud of that. There's 2 independent studies that you'll see here on the slides. They're in your packets that have named communities and schools and evidence-based practice. Also by the Nevada Department of Education, we're the only evidence-based wraparound service provider to meet all 4 tiers of the Every Student Succeeds Act. We help Nevada reach its goals. One of the things that we've really been focusing on over the last 5 years is to really take a look of what the state of Nevada and the Nevada Department of Education, what are their goals, and aligning our goals with their goals. We are absolutely proud Nevadans, and we want to make sure that Nevadans students get to the finish line, career, college, and community ready. So we focus on that. We focus on making sure that we're an efficient use of public funds. We are a proud public-private partnership. We definitely improve the school improvement and support, as I mentioned, with our Tier 1 goals, and we really focus on the framework for integrated supports, removing whatever barrier it is that's keeping our kids from coming to school and being successful. We deliver results. In the 21-22 school year, for our case managed students, so those 5,000 students that we case manage every year, of those that had an attendance goal, 70% of them improved their attendance, 83% improved their behavior, 79% improved their coursework, 99% were promoted to the next grade, and for our 453 seniors last year, 94% of them graduated and had a career, college, and community goal. And for our academy students, which is one level up in Nevada, our academy classes is an elective class in our high schools for juniors and seniors that are at least 3 credits deficient. If they're 3 credits deficient and not on track to graduate, we work very closely with our school principals. We have a teacher, accredited teacher that will teach that class. And then we work with them on a plan to make up those classes to get back on track to graduate. We also work with our teacher for financial literacy, life goals, a career and college plan. They do a story of self. It really is a full intensive course that is in all 3 of our school districts. In Winnemucca, we're not quite in a high school yet, but next year, hopefully we'll have Lowry. For those students, 97% of them walked across the finish line. So we know what we're doing is working, and we are always striving to be at 100%. A few quick alignments to state and federal policy. When the United States Department of Education issued their handbook on how to reopen after school building closures, communities and schools was noted as an effective use of funds in order to keep our kids from staying in school, or keep our kids from dropping out and staying in school. You will also note some of our federal and legislative policies that have also said that integrated student supports is an important function of the state of Nevada and should be funded. In the interim report from this particular body in 2019 and 2021, it was definitely unanimously voted to support the appropriations for integrated student supports once funding was available. Finally, we are on a goal to fulfill our promise to every Nevada student. Right now we're in 1 in 5 Title I or high need schools across the state. There's over 400 Title I schools in the state. We're in 92. We have a long way to go, but I will tell you, we are shovel ready. We are ready to make sure that every student has access to a caring adult, and then it can also alleviate the pressures that are put on our teachers and our principals and our support staff. Our vision is to ensure every student has that access and graduates career, college, and community ready. I also just want to make a quick note that we do have Senate Bill 189, and that would provide $6.9 million in funding over the biennium to grow these vital supports. We would appreciate your support in voting yes. Thank you for your time today, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, allowing me to present our work today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, and we're so proud of the work that CIS does in our state.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have 2 questions. Number 1, do you have data that compare CCSD schools that have community in schools and ones that do not?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Senator. I do have data. So we have previously announced that our graduation rate is 94%, and then we have previously compared it to the graduation rate of our school districts. The one piece of data that we're still working through is that the data that the Nevada Department of Education gives out for their graduation rate is a 4-year cohort. Our graduation rate isn't necessarily a 4-year cohort because some of our students are 5th-year seniors, or some of our students actually graduate early. So those comparisons are to be very, very clear about those comparisons, are still being worked at because we've requested that data from the school district so that we can actually compare our data. So the best answer to the question is I will have to follow up with that once we've finalizing that data.
follow-up, different question. So second question, I see SB 189 for the 6.9 million. And I also see in your handout on slide 10, but page 5, where 50% of the program is funded through philanthropy. Have you engaged CCSD? You know, they have a lot of leftover, I believe, Gear 3. Yeah. Have you asked them about or applied for any of that allocation that they have left over in their federal money?
Thank you, Senator Neal, for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, to the Senator.
Please just go direct.
Thank you. Senator Neal, we have not actually applied for that particular bucket of funding, so I will inquire about that. The Clark County School District specifically has used some of their ESSER dollars to help fully fund our program. And what I mean by that is our contract with the school district says that we can charge $59,000 for the Communities in Schools program. Our cost model is about $89,000. However, prior to the pandemic, schools were not paying even close to that. They were paying about $20,000. So my ability to be able to add more schools at a rapid pace is much different if I have to fundraise the $20,000 to the $89,000. So the school district did use some of their ESSER dollars to help fund the schools that we were currently in and help grow the schools that we are adding. So for example, I added 11 schools in Clark County School District last year. I'll be adding 15 schools next year through the use of those ESSER dollars to fully fund us to the $59,000. So now I only have to fundraise the $30,000. But I am not familiar with the Gear 3 dollars, so we can definitely look at that as a possible additional structure.
How much did they give you in ESSER?
Well, they gave us, I can get you the exact amount and we'll certainly follow up with that. They gave us the difference of $20,000 to $59,000. So let's just say roughly $39,000 per school, and we're in 65 schools.
Yeah, so thank you for that.
But those dollars do expire. They're ESSER dollars. So those dollars will expire, and we are currently working with them to see how we continue to sustain that. So we are in conversations with them. But Year 3, again, wasn't brought up, so I'll definitely bring that back.
I would check on it. I know we had a big joint finance meeting. What was that? Almost a month ago, and they put their money in the record. I would go back and look.
Would be happy to. Thank you, Senator.
Tammy, will you make sure that you state your name for the record when you speak?
Yes, I will.
And if you'll just do it really quick so she can.
Yes, Tammy Hansler, Communities and Schools of Nevada, for the record.
Thank you, and let's go to Senator Titus.
So thank you, Chair Lang. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. So based on what you presented, your program is a success. Certainly if you base it on contacts with students, graduation rates. In one line, why do you feel you are successful compared to outcomes of the schools that do not have your services?
It's the relationship, but I'm sorry. Thank you, Senator Titus. I'm going to get the handle of this. Thank you, Senator Titus, for the question. For the record, Tammy Hansler, Communities and Schools of Nevada. It's the relationship with our site coordinator. Our well-trained full-time site coordinators on a campus do whatever it takes to make sure our students are supported.
So thank you for that. So again, and I mentioned before when we had presentations such as this, that my frustration is that it is something you're doing right that should be obtainable by every school district. Every school should have somebody that can develop a relationship, and it's unfortunate because what I'm hearing is you're in 65 schools, but there's potentially 400 Title I. How many schools are there in Nevada that you're not reaching out to?
Yep. Thank you, Senator Titus, for the question. Tammy Hansler, for the record. We are in 92 schools across the state, 65 in Clark County, 92 total across our 4 school districts. There are about 400 Title I served schools in the state of Nevada. So that means that I have 308 schools left to be in order to make sure that every student has access to communities and schools.
So based on your success, if I might, Madam Chair, continue on this line, based on your success with this, and the fact that you can't be in all the other schools, has there been any relationship with the school districts themselves about creating a program that you are creating? Because it seems like the proof is there. Again, it's that contact relationship, and what's the barriers? Every school should be doing this, and I see frequently in my beliefs that private parties can do a lot better than the government can, and I think that's evidence with what your outcome is, that you, through private government relationships, have recognized the problem, solved the problem, got people into the classroom, and then have results. My frustration is that the schools aren't emulating you. Every school should be developing this policy. And so if there's a word of advice, how can we get and reach out to these other schools that you can't possibly get to, of the 92 out of 400, what can we do, or how can we approach the system in Nevada, because all schools should be doing what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Titus. Tammy Hansler, for the record, Communities and Schools of Nevada. That is a great question, and one of the things our national organization is starting to work on is exactly what you just said, because we may not be able to reach every single school, although it's certainly my goal to do so, but there might be some schools that may not have the ability to do that. So there is a framework that our national organization has created where we can go in and train community school district on the ISS model, and put that all into place, and then identify a school, a person that's employed by the school district that could put that model in place, and then work closely with communities and schools models. It's kind of what we call like a franchise, if you will, so that we're not employing the full-time team members, but we are working very closely with the school district, and that is something that we would consider, especially in some of our smaller school districts where maybe hiring full-time team members may not be an option. We definitely consider that.
You're welcome. Let's go to Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Lang. Tammy, thank you for being here today and for your testimony. I definitely do commend you and your team and you for the work that you're doing. I've seen it in action in Clark County in the schools that you've been in. Research does show that connections to adults definitely do make a difference, and so thank you so much for all that you're doing. I was wondering, as far as workforce, so how many openings do you have? Do you have a workforce shortage, or do you have people lining up to be these site coordinators? And then also, what are the qualifications to be a site coordinator?
Thank you, Senator Buck, for the question. Tammy Hansler, Communities and Schools of Nevada, for the record. So the qualifications, to answer your question, most of our team members are graduates of at least a 2-year university, many of them 4-year, depending, obviously, in our urban areas. That's a little bit easier than in some of our rural areas. Most of them are going for degrees in social work, counseling, mental health, social services, those types of areas. So we do see a lot of our team members that utilize communities and schools as as a foundation for their full-time jobs. I do lose them eventually to go on to become licensed therapists, school counselors, things of that nature. So that does continue to be, a challenge for the organization, but they certainly work with us for many, many years before they do that. Like everybody else, hiring team members is a little bit of a struggle, especially when you're hiring them at the pace that we are. One of the things that we are doing right now is we're actually currently hiring site coordinators this year for the next school year. So we're hiring them now so that I don't have to hire quite as many of them, and then we're training them, and then they're shadowing site coordinators on school campuses right now, so they have the ability, when they do walk on a school building on August 7th or whenever the first day of school is, that they've already seen the work and been part of the work.
And so what are the qualifications to just 2 years and maybe a complementary profession?
Yes, thank you, Senator Brett, for the clarification. Tammy Hansler, for the record. Yes, the qualifications are 2 years, or sometimes we would say, experience, right? So if we have a team member who maybe has worked for another organization similar to ours and has had many, many years in case manager experience, we would certainly consider them as well. So I can't necessarily say that 2 years is it has to be 2 years, or qualifying experience.
Wonderful. I think it's great because it's a breeding ground for this plethora of professionals. And I guess why I'm getting to this is there's a shortage of teachers in the Clark County School District. I mean, 1,283 was the last number that I I had gotten a couple weeks ago. And so I was wondering, are any of your staff members ever looking to be teachers, or could this be somewhat of an answer to maybe a teacher pipeline situation?
Thank you, Senator Buck, for the question. Tammy Hansler for the record. Most of I've seen some of our team members that maybe want to go on to be teachers. Most of them are more in the social services area. So licensed social workers, MSWs, school counselors. So they do get employed by the school district, maybe just not as a teacher.
And then last question, if I may, are you in any charter schools? Like, I know Matter School was looking into this. They're, close to 100% free reduced lunch, high ELL over in my colleague's area, Senator Flores' area. I was wondering if you were looking to grow into any of the charter school spheres.
Thank you, Senator Buck, for the question. For the record, Tammy Hansler, Communities and Schools of Nevada. We are currently not in any charter schools. We have met with Matter and have had some dialogue about potentially adding communities and schools to their campus. We certainly would be open to being added to any charter school campus. Any high-need school that needs us is a place where we would certainly want to grow and support all of our kids.
And so do you base the cost on how many students there are, or is it like a negotiation? So if there's 65 in schools in Clark County, then they get a discounted rate, or how do you I guess, negotiate that?
Yeah. Senator Buck, thank you. Good question. Tammy Hansler for the record. Currently, our model is set up. So a cost model to put a communities and school site coordinator all in is about $89,000. Our school districts pay between 40 and 60% of that cost model in order to put a school on a campus. And that can be done a variety of ways. Some of our school districts, the districts themselves pay it. Some of our school districts have the school make the decision if they want to pay that, because ultimately we want to only be on a school campus where the principal wants us to be on. Sometimes it's a shared cost model, as in right now with CCSD, where the school pays a portion and the district pays a portion. So there's a variety of different ways. We also can be very open to a school if maybe they don't have the money the first year, but are open to getting it over the next couple of years. For example, one of the things that we are looking to do is when we grow into schools, I should have also mentioned we want to grow in feeder patterns. So I only want to grow in schools where we're in the elementary school, we're then go to the middle school, we're there in the high school, so we have that continuum of care. We're currently in Natchez Elementary right now in the Washoe County School District. We want to grow into their feeder school, which is Pyramid Lake. Pyramid Lake is not part of the Washoe County School District. It is its own independent. So we're currently in talks with them, and they may not have the 40% the first year to come on, but that shouldn't be a barrier. So we're working with them on potentially, helping them apply for some grants. We're going to help apply for some grants. Maybe they pay a smaller amount in the middle, and then we true them up over the years. So really the short answer to the question is we're open to any conversation with any school that needs a communities as schools on a campus.
Thank you. Senator Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm going to make an ask that is going to be both simultaneous, an ask of you, but of us as well. Obviously, I'm a huge fan, and I work very closely with most of the schools in my district. Has a CIS presence. And one of the things that, and I want to remind our members, is the site coordinator is the most important person, because that individual is who's going to sell and pitch whether or not CIS should come back the following year. And sometimes a site coordinator is the only reason CIS is there. And I'm not minimizing the model of CIS, but the model of CIS is you mold to the needs of that school.
Yes.
And so an individual becomes so uniquely talented to serve the needs of a particular school that they're going to stay there so long as that individual is doing it. What ultimately happens is if a site coordinator leaves, that is the potential of CIS leaving, because a new site coordinator comes in, doesn't mimic the needs, doesn't necessarily work well with the administration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's important that we understand that relationship so that we pay them more, because if we can keep individuals there, it keeps CIS present, and we ensure that there's that continuum year after year, and you're just going to get better like a teacher. right? It takes a few years to get very good in a particular school with a particular leadership model. The same thing is true when you're serving the needs of a particular population while you're also working, because site coordinators don't just help students. They do assemblies at night and they translate. They do a bunch of admin work. They end up doing 1,000 different roles that were never in the CIS description, but that's part of why CIS is so successful. So my ask, and it's twofold, because we can't pay them more if we're not helping you, right? And if we're talking about there's $100 million plus with the school district that's sitting there, and I know Senator Neo just alluded to that, we really should be investing more, and that we allow for them to utilize that funding specifically to retain their site coordinators, because a good site coordinator will focus on the kids that need the most attention. Plus, every single day we talk about in this building how we need more support services for mental health, more support services for individuals who have chronic absenteeism, more support, all of that. And that is all CIS does. That is strictly what you do. So, my plea to this body and to you, because it has to be twofold, is that we take care of them. And if we do that effectively, I think it'll be a model we can replicate where the whole state is doing it. And right now is the time, because we have some extra money. I know I don't want to put any school district or anybody on the spot, but if there's money there and we have a proven model, we should put more money there. And that's it. So it's more of a request to us, and it's something I'm preaching to the choir. So I am not pretending you don't know any of this, but this is more for our members. I really do think we have an obligation to invest in programs that are absolutely working. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Flores. Any further questions? Knowing there's no more questions, how's that? Thank you so much for being here today, and we continue to support the work that you do. And I know your office is right by my house in my district, by the way, and I've been there, and I just really appreciate all that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very
And
much.
we
for
look
having
forward
me.
till tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow, CIS Day at the Legislature. Breakfast at 7:30, 9:30. Would love to have you.
There you go. That
Thank
was a
you.
prompt. And with that, we're going to go into hearings, but I did want to recognize one thing. We have with us today Senator Mo Dennis, who's the former chair of education. So welcome and thank you for being here. He did a lot of great work over the years. And with that, we'll open the hearing on Assembly Bill 74. Assembly Bill 74. And it revises provisions related to higher education. And we'll welcome Assemblywoman Mosca to the podium or to the desk and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Lang. Thank you, Senators. I'm presenting Assembly Bill 74 today on higher education on public-private partnerships, and I'm excited to be joined by our Acting Chancellor, Dale Archiagua, who will help me present the bill today. This bill is a recommendation from the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Education, and it is an Assembly Education Committee bill. So this is a committee bill. I will share a brief background, the why, kick it over to my colleague, and then we'll be open for questions. So during the 2021 session, Senate Bill 342 was passed, which allowed the Nevada System of Higher Education Board of Regents to enter into agreements with publicly or privately owned medical facilities to promote and enhance medical or health education programs at universities. In practice, this bill opened the door for Renown and the University of Nevada, Reno's School of Medicine to have a partnership that developed a clinical research center. With the success of SB 342, the Interim Committee on Education considered the idea that all universities, UNLV, UNR, and DRI, should be able to enter into public-private partnerships. Specifically, Dr. David Demore, Interim Executive Director of the Lindsay Institute in Brookings Mountain West, and he's also the professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at UNLV, highlighted the need to codify university-based public-private partnerships using blanket language Doing so could help to facilitate more efficient and effective partnerships between universities and other entities that promote the public good. So that's really just the background. Because it had happened before, during the interim, they discussed that it should be a blanket policy, and then it became a committee bill. So with that, I'm going to kick it over for more context to our chancellor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Assemblywoman Mosca. For the record, I'm Dale Urquiaga. I'm the acting chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education, and fun fact, the former national president of Communities and Schools. In that spirit, I'm pleased to be with you today to talk about this bill and the bill that will follow, because it is about, both these bills are about partnerships and agreements. So we appreciate the Assemblywoman carrying this bill for the Legislative Committee during the interim, because it does broaden the authority and sort of open the door for more agreements like Renown, or some of these agreements can be academic, but the bill was amended in the other house to include student life agreements as well. And so from our perspective, this would allow any institution really a clear pathway, and it allows the Board of Regents to enter into those agreements. One of the things that the Chancellor does on behalf of the board is sign contracts and agreements all day long, some 500 per year so far in my 10-month tenure. And this kind of sort of umbrella agreement across the institutions would be easy access then for partners. Communities and Schools does not program in the college space, but other organizations do, and we have many, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit entities in the state with whom we think we could work. So we appreciate the bill in its original form. The bill was amended also in the other house to include the language about if we enter into these agreements that would be dealing with a facility. For example, the language was added here by amendment dealing with prevailing wage, and that caused a conversation as that bill was heard there and then moved to this house. This committee has heard me, I think, some committee has heard me talk about legislative performance audits that were done by your staff during the interim, and one of the findings is in those audits that the system should seek legislative authorization for public-private partnerships for construction projects. As a practical matter today, when we do a land real estate deal, it is not in the purest sense of that phrase, public-private partnership. It really is about the real estate transaction. But as we look forward to other necessary improvements at some of our campuses, we think P3 or deals will be necessary. And so we talked about it a little bit in the other house, and I'm convinced that Senator Daley, who I think is still in the room today, does nothing except watch committees at night, because he called me and said, hey, I saw you talk about this audit and this bill, and I would like to offer an amendment. So it's my understanding, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, that there is an amendment to the bill that would address, frankly, my audit issue and still give clear guidance to the system in how it might develop public-private partnerships.
Thank you, and yes, and if you're all okay with it, we'd like to have Senator Daley come up and go over his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Skip Daley, representing Senate District 13. Thank you for letting me be here. And I was just trying to think back earlier. I don't think I've ever been to the Education Committee before in all the sessions that I've been in. So I don't get here too often, which is good. So some of what the Chancellor just alluded to when we were talking about this, and I heard about this through the building trades guys. They came to me and when they put I believe Section F in the existing bill as it came over to you guys. And then I did ask for the audit, and the audit then said, they should have this authority, and it was really unclear if they could enter into these agreements and what happens on the construction and various things. So along those lines, and public-private partnerships have been around for a while. Some are good, some are bad. But I think they're the direction that more people are going. I don't think it's a bad thing. And we need to give some guidance. So it occurred to me that it wasn't just an NSHE issue. I'm sure if the legislative audit people were looking at this, they may be looking at any number of other state agencies. So the thought process was we should add something into 338, similar to what they have for transportation facilities, which is where I got a lot of this early language. So then it would clearly put into the statute that people are allowed to do these public-private partnerships. These are the way we anticipate they're going to work. lay some ground rules and there's some structure. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. The transportation facility is another 15 sections, and I said, I don't think we need all of that. But this will lay the framework that people can do public-private partnerships. These are the rules on when you're going to implement it and move forward. And it would apply to any state agency or public body, basically, is the way it was done. And if you want, I can go through. We have the definitions. Concession is defined. I took that language straight from language that's in the NRS for transportation facilities. Same thing as private partner, public-private partnership. I did change facility from a transportation facility more to a building facility. So that was changed. Sections 1 and 2 are copied right over on that. The user fee defined came out of that. Applicability, I wanted to make clear that we weren't interfering with the transportation facilities, so we said these provisions don't apply to the transportation facility. And then the public-private partnership and the type of agreements they can enter into, at least in related to construction, was A through I, which is also in the existing statute for transportation. And then we added 3, which captures the prevailing wage, and then 4, and the chancellor talked to me last night. He said he thought that part was interesting, and I said, a lot of times when you have EL Court or somebody like a foundation that's going to give some money, they're going to say, hey, we'll partner with you. We'll build this facility, a library, whatever it might be. But they want to be able to help in the procurement, and they may have a contractor in mind, somebody they dealt with. So knowing that that happened and does happen in construction, I said, fine, you don't have to follow the bidding laws if you put in 75% of the money. So I thought that was a fair compromise, and I think the chancellor is going to speak to the amendment. I did work with him to make sure that we could have agreement from the original sponsors. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them, but that's what we're trying to fix. If they have a problem, I think everybody else will eventually as well.
Okay, Senator Daly, if you wouldn't mind staying up here, we'll have the chancellor speak to the amendment real quick, and then we'll open it for questions, and someone may have a question for you.
And Erica Mosca, for the record, I just wanted to add for our wonderful chairs here of the Assembly Committee on Education that it is a friendly amendment.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Dale Urquiaga, thanks for that cover, Madam Chair. So yes, I appreciate Senator Daly reaching out and doing the legwork to contact the bill sponsors from the other house. The amendment does address INSHI's issue from the audit, which I greatly appreciate. So we're happy to support the amendment. Also happy to support this bill in the form that it reached you from the other house. And if I may, in a personal indulgence, I erred in my opening remarks. I did not introduce one of my bosses is here. Regent Heather Brown is in the audience, and that's bad on me not to recognize my bosses. So please welcome Regent Brown.
Okay, with that, we'll open it for questions. Let's go to Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So would you clarify for me on this amendment that with this amendment, if accepted and passes, that this bill then would mandate prevailing wage on all government private partnerships?
It would if a public body entered into a public-private partnership as defined here. It would require the prevailing wage.
Right,
and obviously, you have the public and the private, so there are some partnerships and various things there, and the public agencies are.
Yeah, thank you. That's my concern. Thank you very much.
Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have questions on, no offense, Senator Daly, but I don't really know what you're doing. But I'm going to go to section, I have questions on section 1, sub 1. This piece about the, I guess the student life piece here. I guess the first thought was, I know the Renown piece happened. I know the medical school happened. What I couldn't find, or I didn't have time to find, what was the public policy reason why INSHI was prevented in the first place from having the public partnership? Was there, in order to do it, I know, the legislature had to give the authority, but what were the barriers on why they didn't want to give you the authority prior to the medical school, INSHI?
For the record, Dale Urquiaga, Acting Chancellor, and I apologize, Senator, I was not in INCHE at that time, and so I don't know why special legislation was required. The board broadly has authority to enter into agreements, and I don't know why that one was so specific for that agreement. It may have been the scope. And I think that is why the legislative committee responded to Professor Demore to say we should probably have sort of blanket language so that you don't have to do this every time someone has a deal like that. But I apologize, I don't know the specifics to the Renown deal.
Okay. And then, quick follow-up, Madam Chair. So, and then my second question is, well, I believe it's section 1, sub 2, line D, the provisions governing joint employment and supervision of employees, if applicable. What would be the crossover here that we're contemplating in the future? Because it just kind of rolls in that you can enter into an agreement and then have provisions governing the joint employment and supervision of employees. So what are the instances where we're going to have joint employment in a public-private partnership and duties and everything else that needs to then be scaled? Because that just opens several doors in several different directions, but I wanted to have more conversation about that.
For the record, Dale Urquiaga, Acting Chancellor. So I'll give you what I think is a hypothetical example, but I think it addresses your issue. So in the case of, let's say healthcare, we may have teaching faculty who are employees of the system, and they may do, and I know nothing about healthcare, so keep in mind this is a hypothetical example, they may do work at a medical or dental facility as well, and so they may have some sort of agreement there. This statute would require us to delineate, is that a salary share, is that a share of benefits? That would be, as I read this provision, established in advance in the original agreement. These are our employees, those are your employees, these are joint employees, and we would agree to those terms in case money passes back and forth between the two entities.
Thank you for that. That's a really good example because money's probably going to pass back and forth. And then I was just wondering, when we talk about INCHE employees, then all other adopted policies apply if they become a shared relationship or shared duty in some aspect of the university, meaning all discrimination policies, everything that's related to the individuals operating on the campus and duties therefore roll into that. And so what do you contemplate in terms of on the private side of it? I guess the delegation of liability and all of those other things that would come into play if there is an act by their employee, because they're not going to be an independent contractor.
For the record, Dale Urquiaga, I think you've gone down the exact legal train of thought that would go into a contract. Our employees are governed by Title IX and certain aspects because they are higher education employees. So if we are sharing an employee, yes, you'd be subject to our code. You'd also be, if our employee is working part private, you'd be subject to those state laws. And things like liability, and I'll be simple again, like slip and fall or those sorts of things. This would require us to spell that out in the agreement so that nobody gets caught by surprise. And that if it came to this, that the public liability or risk management is covered and is either absorbed by the system or is shifted to the private entity. I think that would be negotiated in the contract. And this, from my perspective, having seen a number of other kinds of agreements cross my desk, this is a good flag for our business process services because, this is a very complex organization. We run about $2 billion a year through there, through 2 business centers, one north, one south, over 8 institutions, plus the chancellor's office. And so having these flags help my legal staff do contract review.
You're welcome. Senator Buck. We're good? Any other questions from the committee? There are none. If you'll step back, we'll open it for, Senator Daly.
Yep. Thank you. I forgot to mention my name last time. So Skip Daly, Senate District 13 for the record. Just wanted to mention on this and to Senator Titus's question regarding that. It would only apply to the construction portion of any public-private partnership, and the statutes that exist currently for transportation facilities, that's the only authorization, requires prevailing wage. I'm not creating anything new. I'm just saying if we're doing public-private partnerships, it's the same standards as the existing language on public-private partnerships. Prevailing wage applies.
Great, thank you for the clarification. Senator Hammond has a question. Don't go too far.
Don't go too far. Yeah, it just came to mind when you said that, because the first time I ever heard of a public-private partnership is when we were talking about the RTC and the use of those. And it occurred to me as we were questioning you that a lot of these public-private partnerships really didn't come into fruition until around 2010, or maybe a little bit before that, and we started seeing an incline. So I think there's been a lot of federal legislation that has passed that has helped to increase the number of PPPs going out there. And so when we were talking about the hospital or the medical center, I'm just not sure that it was, and that's where I'm really curious. That's why I'm grateful for the question, and would like to know more about the answer. I'm just not sure it was just standard. It wasn't standard practice, and so it was the first time I think that it came up. And so what you're trying to do here is set a pattern for usage in the future, and you'd like to apply what we have done into construction or to transportation PPPs to what we're doing here, and that's it. Am I correct in that then? I'm trying to sum it all up here in my mind.
Yes, and the chair asked me to be short earlier. Skip Daly again for the record, so I will try to. Public-private partnerships have been around for a while, but they have made a progression and become more common. A lot of times when you're trying to do the public-private partnership, the private partner is trying to leverage some bargain with the public where there's a fee that's collected so they can pay for on that, especially in construction. You see it in sewer projects, water projects, and the transportation facility was theoretically for tolls possibly being charged.
Heavy rail and light rail in Phoenix and Colorado and Denver area, all those.
Lots of different ways to do it, right? So I'm not saying that is bad, and that's where there's some good and there's some bad. But when I looked at the audit, read the audit, understood what the issue was, this one thing giving NSHE this ability to enter into these agreements kind of left all of the rest of the agencies in the blank. And as you know, if you don't have it in state law and one person says they went and got it, I think the courts would come and say, you didn't specifically get information. So this is just trying to put everybody on the same playing field, and I followed the same pattern from what the transportation facility language was. So I wasn't trying to invent anything new.
So let me ask you this question. So in the charter world, where you're trying to create schools that don't have a lot of capital funding, you have a lot of these charter schools come up with foundations, and the foundation's job is to try and create revenue to help them build onto their campuses or build a campus. With a foundation's money and again their partnership with the charter school, would that then be wrapped up into this as well?
Thank you again, Skip Daly, for the record. So yes, public-private partnership, the charter schools are public agencies. They already have to pay prevailing wage on charter schools, as you know anyway. So in the partnership that they would have here, depending on how much money is put in by the private, then maybe they would get relief from having to publicly bid. But yes, they would be able to do those types of things. And if there was some cost-sharing thing where the private money then was reimbursed somehow over the course of time, they could enter into those types of agreements.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of time how public-private partnerships work.
Right. But if that foundation is generating a lot of the private dollars and they're going into, then that this wouldn't apply to that.
If they're doing it with a public partner and they enter in an agreement on the public-private, they have to enter into an agreement, which is defined in here, then this would cover it. It would also allow them to do it. So right now, with this language just for the university, it could be argued under the Dillon's rule and the rest of it that the legislature didn't authorize you to do it, so you wouldn't be able to. So this would lift that uncertainty off of any other public agency.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we have one more, Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just really quick, because I was reading the information from the interim, and so the question that I was trying to understand, it was mentioned about how the Knowledge Fund has just kind of paved the way for the public-private partnership. And then what I was trying to find out, so at that time, we were also trying to navigate the constitutional limitation between direct investment, right, and private companies. And so with this broad language, are we crossing over? Because this, you have two bills, right? So it kind of speaks to, so you might as well just ask and answer it on both. But it opens the door for how does that direct investment then work within that limitation in this broad language? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like in the Knowledge Fund, we had a very scaled and narrow goal in which we were achieving. In this one, you have educational program, student life, and other when we look at the other policy. And so, do you have thought process on that?
For the record, Dale Urquiaga from the Nevada System of Higher Education. So the short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is I believe your lawyer would argue that this is still limited enough because the agreements are all short in term and fairly narrow in scope, but I'm not a lawyer, and I'm certainly not your lawyer. I do remember that conversation about the Knowledge Fund. I was here when it was created, and I don't think that came up during the interim at the interim committee.
And one more, Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Lang. Does NSHE get facility funding for your facilities, or do you get it in one big lump?
For the record, Dale Urquiaga asked me tomorrow. I'm kidding. Tomorrow is the capital improvement project's closing. So the answer is yes and no. NSHE is part of the Public Works and capital improvement process, and so we go through a vetting process at the board, beginning at the institutions. Certain buildings are built with public monies that are distributed to us from the legislature. They might be the planning side or they might be the construction side. Other buildings are built purely with private philanthropy, and other buildings are built with a mix. And so we do participate in public works and capital improvement projects and have over the years. We also have facilities and lands that are provided through philanthropy.
And the reason I ask this is because we know that charter school buildings are not paid for. We don't get any facility funds. It comes out of our student allocated per pupil funds. And so to divert that to prevailing wage causes me concern and alarm, because there's no way to do business with that happening and pay teachers and be about kids. So I just want that on record.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll have you step back and we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of Assembly Bill 74, please come to the front.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, today representing the Council for a Better Nevada. Here to speak in favor of Assembly Bill 74 as drafted. Not had a chance to review the amendment, but I will do that. If I may, Madam Chair, just quickly maybe shed some light on Senator Nill's question with regard to the medical school. I was involved in the negotiations of that medical school and how it came about. So there were no prohibitions or barriers for the public-private partnership there, because in some senses it wasn't really a public-private partnership. The overwhelming majority of the funds came from the philanthropists and the donors. There was a small contribution from the state at the end. So all of the provisions of 338 prevailing wage did not apply on that project. However, the Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation that constructed it voluntarily paid prevailing wage and used prevailing wage on the project. And so the reason this is in front of us, and the reason this came to the committee in the first place, to the Joint Standing Committee on Education, was that the legislative audit that was authorized by you last session came back and said, we're not sure one way or another whether or not the legislature has the authority to enter into these types of agreements, these public-private partnerships. So this is an attempt to make clear in statute that in fact we can. the state can enter into public and private partnerships. And that's the primary reason why we support the legislation, is that clarification. In addition to that, the reason we support the legislation is that it has done a really good job. For those of you who may or may have not followed the medical school, it's been a real miracle for Southern Nevada, and has really, I think, in some ways fixed the culture of philanthropy in Nevada for people to want to come forward and participate in these. And this just furthers that we can turn some of our higher education endeavors into solely funded and done by governments, to have some local government or some private sector participation too. So that's why we like this. With regard to Senator Daley's amendment, I would have concerns about broadly the chilling impact that broadly applying prevailing wage might have across the board. I don't have a problem with the way it's drafted here, to be very specific. The real issue that we need to address, not so much public-private partnerships, is the lease purchase concept. And we're hoping to address that in Senator Canizaro's bill as well. But that's the issue. That's where people are intentionally trying to get around the prevailing wage laws, and that's not appropriate. And so we do need to address that separately. Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I went over.
Thank you. It's okay. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Lang and members of the committee. Nick Schneider, for the record, representing the Vegas Chamber, and we are also in support of AB 74 as drafted, as we believe that, and are proponents of providing additional tools to enhance Nevada's educational programs. However, we will also have to review the amendment presented by Senator Daley and bring it to our board. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Please go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Constance Brooks, for the record, representing University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We are in support of AB 74. We enjoy public-private partnerships in a variety of areas within our campus operations, as well as through academics, whether that's through supercomputing or through campus food services, as well as the little robots that deliver food to our students and staff and faculty. We have a partnership with Starship and legislation to help with the right-of-way of those robots. We also enjoy public-private partnerships for the use of buildings and the construction of buildings. For example, where my office is located in the Gateway Building is a mixed-use development building where we have residential units on the top floor. The third and second floors are office spaces for UNLV faculty and staff. And then on the first floor, there are retail spaces. And so we view that as just a wonderful opportunity for mixed-use development and public-private partnerships for our campus community. So we are in support of this bill. We have not reviewed the amendment at length, but we are following the lead of the Nevada System of Higher Education and the Chancellor's testimony. And at first glance, we don't have any issues with the amendment. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Anthony Ruiz representing Nevada State. We're here to support Assembly Bill 74. Similar to my UNLV and NSHE and my colleagues there, haven't had time to fully review the amendment, but following the lead to support it as amended. Public-private partnerships are important work to what we do at Nevada State College. We have housing on campus. That is a public-private partnership. We've got over 500 acres left to develop on our campus that I think public-private partnerships would be really great to use for. We recently updated our campus master plan and set aside 300 acres specifically for development of these types of partnerships. So I just think the clarity that this bill does to ensure that we do have this authority is really helpful, and that's why we would urge support. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no one in Las Vegas. Is there anyone on the phones?
Yes, one moment, Chair. To testify in support of AB 74, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to speak in opposition to AB 74? Anyone in Las Vegas? And anyone on the phones? AB 74 speaking in opposition.
To testify in opposition of AB 74, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to speak in neutral? Anyone in Las Vegas wishing to speak in neutral? And anyone on the phones wishing to speak in neutral?
To testify neutral to AB 74, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify neutral at this time.
Okay, with that, we'll close the hearing on AB 74, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill, and thank you, Assemblywoman Mosca. And we'll open the hearing on Assembly Bill 375, which revises provisions related, 372, what did I say? Oh. Revises provisions related to higher education, and that will be the Chair of Education, the Assemblyman, Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Welcome.
Thank you. And I have my co-presenter in Las Vegas. Thank you, Madam Chair and esteemed Committee on Education. It's exciting to be here for the first time this session. For the record, I'm Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod, representing Assembly District 34 in Clark County. I'm here to present Assembly Bill 372, which revises provisions relating to higher education. With me is Dr. Sandra Cosgrove, who will also speak to the bill. Just a little background on where this bill came from. As many of you know, Dr. Cosgrove, she is really all about advocacy and getting people involved and really understanding the legislative process and how it works. So she had put together a Zoom meeting of stakeholders and really people who were kind of green to the whole legislative process and knew that they wanted to make a difference but weren't really sure exactly how to get that done. So she put together this Zoom, and it ended up, what came out of that was partially this bill. And one of the things she talked about in length is how a lot of bills, because we kind of create them and we're kind of in silos until we get here and we see what other people are bringing, bills tend to work in tandem with each other and can actually sometimes be derailed by other bills. So one bill that we started looking at was I believe it's Assembly Bill 113 from the governor's office, and it talks about creating the Office of Early Childhood. And early childhood is something that I'm quite passionate about. I have had the pleasure of volunteering as the president of Family to Family Connection, which is a early childhood organization that really focuses on 0 to 5. And in that scope, they provide free classes on teaching parents or caregivers really how to be their child's first teacher. And that starts from, I would say probably 2 weeks old, that you become your child's first teacher. I often would say to people, people say, I'm getting my child ready for school, and they think it's a backpack and, all the school supplies, but getting your child ready for school starts right away. So when 113 dropped, Dr. Cosgrove, I had seen the Zoom that she had put together, and we started talking about the opportunities that family engagement, that early childhood family engagement is so critical through the lifetime of the student. So in her capacity, and she'll speak more to this, even having students at CSN, you can tell the kids who really, or the families who really understood that importance of learning at an early age and where that starts. And so this creates the authorization once again for the Board of Regents to enter into those agreements with nonprofit. I'll give you an example of one that we are seeing. UNLV Preschool had received a grant, a federal grant, really opening up to preschool to a lot of folks who wouldn't be able to afford it. Preschool is very expensive. When I had my daughter in full-time preschool at UNLV, it was literally would have been less expensive for her to go as a full-time student in state than for her to be a full-time preschooler at UNLV. So that should tell you something. So this grant makes it available, but one of the aspects of the grant is that there's an early childhood family engagement aspect, and that's not something UNLV preschool per se has the ability to do. So this would be an example for like family to family to come in and work with the parents and teach them about being their child's first teacher. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cosgrove, and then if you need me to go over the bill, it's not a long bill, front and back, love that. And then we'll stand for questions. Go ahead, Dr. Cosgrove. Thanks for being here.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Sondra Cosgrove, Sondra Cosgrove. I'm a history professor at the College of Southern Nevada and the executive director of Vote Nevada. Today I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not my employer. I support Assembly Bill 372, and I would like to thank the Assemblywoman for sponsoring the bill. I work in the space that connects the mission of Nevada's higher education institutions with nonpartisan policy development. In this space, you will often see me and hear me advocating for a better behavioral health system because my students not only need access to affordable higher education and training, but also high-quality social services that keep them healthy and supported. And my students need access to civics education to empower them to be civically engaged so that they can advocate for themselves while promoting sound policy choices. Regarding this bill, while it may not seem like there's a connection between strong early learning policies and higher education, that's not the case. When students arrive at college, we expect that their brains have had access to enriching experiences that facilitate development in ways that make them ready to learn the skills needed to be successful citizens and productive workers. But what happens if this development did not happen? Higher education is currently not funded to address developmental delays, so students often end up dropping out, not because they're not a good fit for college, but because they need help acquiring the life skills they missed somewhere along that path to becoming young adults. So where does this bill fit in as a solution to this particular problem? This bill addresses the root cause of the problem. Nevada needs robust early learning ecosystems that empowers parents to focus on brain development at the beginning of a child's life with an array of resources, and I hope with support from higher education. AB 372 highlights the need for more partnerships to help children, and it informs faculty that we can use our community service and research contractual requirements to contribute to building an early learning system that will then send to us students who are college ready from day one. Thank you.
And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for comments. Thank you, and not that I disagree, but is there anything in law that prohibits the university system from doing this now? And why do we have to put this in yet in another law to why can't they just do this on their own?
Assemblywoman Bilbray-Axelrod, for the record. Well, and Dr. Cosgrove, if you want to take this, because you kind of talked a little bit about.
Sure. Yeah, so Sondra Cosgrove for the record, to the senator. You are correct that currently this can happen right now, but oftentimes I can tell you as a faculty member, when we're looking at my contractual obligation to do community service or to do research, sometimes you're in a gray area whether you think you can be able to use that as the requirement for your contract. This will help faculty such as myself be able to say to my administration, this is something that I am allowed to do, and this is something that I'm going to do, it is in law. This helps faculty to be able to say, this is where my passion is, this is how I want to use my time that I'm contractually obligated to use, and I want my employer, the Nevada System of Higher Education, to recognize it. So the answer to your question is that it helps faculty to be able to say, this is allowed for me to do.
And so if I might follow up on that. So I appreciate that, but that's your passion and that's what you can already do. What about all the other different faculty members who have other passions and they need to codify their passions? I mean, if there's no law that says you can't do it, again, why aren't you doing it?
Shannon Bilberry Axelrod for the record. So we also, I'll speak to family to family connection. There was also entering that agreement in the preschool. We went to an attorney to make sure that everything, and there is some gray areas there. So, I'm not an attorney, but different attorneys look at statute in different ways. You get 100 attorneys, they're going to give you 100 different opinions. So. Just kind of clarification there.
Thank you. Any further questions? Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have a question on page 2, sub B. So listening to the testimony, this has the cost allocation. So it's now saying that a faculty can do this, but now it's saying that the system must also share within the cost of what this agreement is. So how does that, what has the system said about that particular provision?
Shannon Bilberry Axelrod for the record. The way I was reading it, and maybe this isn't correct, but I thought it was the 2 was saying the agreement had to lay out those costs. So if it's shared or not shared. So that's the way I was reading it, but now that you just said that, I could see that maybe that was incorrect. I don't know if the system would like to, want to come up? Okay.
I am so glad you stayed here.
So am I. For the record, Dale Urquiaga, Acting Chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education. I'll begin by saying the system does support this bill. It's nice to see my colleague, Dr. Cosgrove, and on behalf of her employer, I can say we support her bill. She can't say that, so I can. We support the bill, and I do understand the questions being asked about, like, can we already do this? And as I said previously, I think things like this are good guardrails and sort of flags, indicators for the board and the institutions to know that this is a space where this work is important and indeed critical. You all know I was superintendent, and we scaled up the really largest early childhood program at that time. So I really appreciate this long view. To the specific question about Section 2B, I read it the same way that the Assemblywoman does, because it says an allocation of any costs that must be shared. That doesn't say an allocation of sharing costs. Like, we aren't obligated to share costs, but if we do, we must address that in the agreement, is how I would interpret this. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but that's how I see this, is it requires us to spell out so we don't get in some future disagreement of, well, you said you would pay for the cost of the online licensing for training, and now you're not doing that.
Okay, thank you for that, because I would be thinking an agreement entered into in this section must include A and B without limitation. And therefore, when I sit at the table, I'm going to start talking about, okay, what's the 50-50 split? That's exactly where I'm going to go. And so, the institution has to have that money for whatever that 50-50, 40-60, 30-70 conversation happens, and it just opens you up to additional funding.
Madam Chair, if I may, for the record, Dale Urquiaga, Senator, you wouldn't start with 50-50, you'd probably start higher than that, come on. And with due respect, I don't mean to amend the Assemblywoman's bill, but if it would make you more comfortable, you may ask counsel if that phrase should be or might be any cost that may be shared rather than must be. And so that, again, the Assemblywoman and I are not lawyers, we just play them on TV, but you may wish to either clarify that in the record or in an amendment.
Shannon Bilberry Axelrod, and like I said, we were both reading it the same way, but like I said, you get different eyes, so I'm amendable. I'm amendable to that amendment.
And we'll ask legal about that. He's not here today, but we'll ask him and get an answer for the committee. Any further questions? Seeing none, if you want to step back, we'll take comment, public comment. Anyone in the room here wishing to speak in favor of Assembly Bill 372?
Good afternoon, Chair Lang and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nick Schneider, representing the Vegas Chamber, and we believe that prioritizing education for our rising Nevadans and creating a stronger, more qualified workforce is paramount to the future of our state and the continued diversification of our economy. And prioritizing that education really starts in early childhood, and family involvement is a major factor in providing that support. The Chamber is in support of AB 372, as it aims to provide families and caretakers with the tools and best practices to better engage in educating our kids from a young age. We urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas. Anyone on the phones, BPS, speaking in favor of 372?
Testify in support of AB 372. Press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone on the phones wishing to speak in opposition?
Testify in opposition of AB 372. Star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Okay, anyone wishing to speak in neutral? Anyone on the phones wishing to speak in neutral?
To testify neutral to AB 372, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify neutral at this time.
Thank you. And I think Assemblywoman is good to go. And thank you for being here today. And with that, we'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 372. Thank you for being here. And we're going to open the hearing on Assembly Bill 423. It comes from the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs, and it revises provision governing meetings of a Board of Trustees of a school district. Please proceed when you're ready, and welcome to Senate Education.
Thank you, Chair Lang and committee members. For the record, I'm Assemblywoman Selena Torres, and I proudly represent Assembly District 3 in the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada. And I am pleased to present AB 423 today on behalf of the Committee on Government Affairs, the hardest working committee in the Nevada State Legislature. This bill revises provisions governing meetings of a Board of Trustees of a school district. I'm going to begin with some basic background information, then we'll get into a summary of the bill. I don't expect it to run too long. Open meeting laws are commonly referred to as sunshine laws. The idea behind such laws is that public bodies are not meeting on important issues impacting their constituents in the middle of the night behind closed doors. In recent years, school board meetings have become increasingly contentious, attracting a lot of public comment, and meetings often continue well into the next morning. Oftentimes, tempers are hot and patience is thin late into the night, and that is not a recipe of good education policy. Not a recipe for good policy. Many parents bring their children to these meetings where they're sometimes sleeping on the floor during the final hours of the meeting. This needs to stop. The legislature needs to provide additional guardrails to keep these meetings safe, and that's why I'm presenting AB 423. I think it's important to note that unlike the state legislature, which meets for 120 days every 2 years, school board meetings are year-round, and they operate year-round and can create meetings year-round. There are only two sections to AB 423. Subsection 6 of Section 1 prohibits a Board of Trustees from taking any action at a regular or special meeting after 11:59 p.m. on the day of the meeting, except in an emergency as defined under NRS 241.020. Otherwise, no further action may be taken unless the board schedules a delayed agenda item at a future meeting pursuant to open meeting law, or they can wait until at least 24 hours after the originally scheduled time of the meeting, but not later than 3 business days of the original scheduled date to take such action. For example, if a school board meeting begins on Tuesday at 8 a.m. and goes until 11:59, the board must wait to take further action until Wednesday at the same scheduled start time at 8 a.m., but not later than Friday in a non-emergency situation. Subsection 7 of Section 1 authorizes but does not require the Board of Trustees to restrict public comment at a regular meeting or a special meeting if the public comment meets one or both of the following criteria: is a topic that is not relevant or within the authority of the Board of Trustees, or is willfully disruptive of the meeting by being slanderous or offensive. I think it's important to note that that section of public comment law exists in other areas of the statute and is no different than what already is under our open meeting laws here in the state of Nevada. Finally, Section 2 makes the bill effective on July 1st of this year. While this is a policy committee, I would like to note that the fiscal notes submitted show there is no fiscal impact. Thank you. I welcome your support of AB 423, and I'm open for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a couple questions. I'll start and ask you just one question. Can you tell me, in your research, how many school districts have gone beyond this timeline? I'm just curious. It seems awful late to have a meeting.
Yeah, it is awful late to have a meeting. So I think, we've seen it, and I had several conversations with some of my colleagues in the Assembly, Assemblymentarians for the record, that have had the opportunity to serve on school boards. And it seems to be a pretty rare occurrence in most districts. Unfortunately, we seem to see it quite often in Southern Nevada over the last couple years, especially like taking action. I will also note that this bill is restricted to only action that would be taken. It's not restricted to presentations or anything else that the meeting might have. This is specifically so that there's not votes in the middle of the night when our public is unable to participate.
Great, thank you. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on sub 7 on this. I know you said willfully disruptive, and that was an amendment. The word willfully is what you added on the other side, but disruptive by being slanderous or offensive. So what would rise to the level of being willfully disruptive? This is, education is a very passionate topic. They could be disruptive because they feel like, number one, they're not being heard. They're not being, their comments are not being addressed. We've seen that in previous meetings. Matter of fact, we've seen offensive or willfully disruptive behavior probably from their own board members sitting on the board. Now you're applying a standard to the public who feels very strongly about what's happening to their children. So can you help me, give me an example of what would rise to this level?
Supplementaries for the record. So I did have several conversations with the ACLU before putting in any language regarding public comment specifically. And this was kind of, this is a place where we're able to just, I think, be happy. And the reason why is because this is actually already what exists in statute. So this isn't any different. This is adding it, but it's currently existing in statute. And to specifically example, I think legal might be better able to answer kind of the definition of willfully disruptive. But as stated, this isn't any different than what currently exists and is actually applicable to our own open meeting laws and as well as the laws that we have within this body for public comment.
Thank you for that. So, Madam Chair, quick follow-up. Because you could have students who are planning a protest at the CCSD board meeting. They are intending to go with intent to disrupt and be present at the meeting. Are they going to be told that you're now falling out of the, you're violating the law and you should be removed?
Supplementaries for the record, I don't think that is any different than what currently exists.
Well, it didn't apply under CCSD though. They had a different, you're now enacting this in law. I mean, disruption, I feel, and what is offensive is kind of like potentially, I mean, I could be seen as offensive at a board meeting. Am I going to get put out of a meeting?
Senator Neal, we will ask legal.
Okay.
And because he's not here and he's running a little behind, we'll ask him and get back to you on that because I think those words are important and we'll get a definition from him.
Okay.
Okay?
And if I could just make a request.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Supplementaries for the record, and if you could also ask legal, my understanding is that this is the exact same as the current language that exists in public comment for open meeting law right now. So it's no different. It's just making sure that it's very specific to it's very specific to the Board of Trustees. But yes, because CCSD has to follow open meeting law, my understanding is it's currently applicable. But I would like to just have that confirmed for the members of this committee as well.
We'll find out. Thank you. Senator Hammond.
My colleague knows I have like one or two questions, a committee meeting, and she just took one of mine. So, the only thing I could add, actually, first of all, I know you messed me over. It's always so one, getting a definition of what this is, that'd be great. But two, who determines, right? I mean, in this case, is it going to be the school board members? If one of them objects to something that they consider to be slanderous and or offensive, can they then act upon it, or does it have to be the president of the board, or does it have to be somebody who is it that makes that determination?
So that's always for the record. I mean, it would be the same as this body. The chair runs the meeting. The chair of the board would run the meeting and be ultimately able to determine that. That being said, there is legal counsel with them, and I'm sure school boards, if they're not present, can be happy to answer that as well. That they still have to follow. I mean, they still have to follow our constitutional rights. There's nothing in in this language that differs from it. This is a conversation we had in the assembly as well. And it was clarified by legal, like, this already exists. So, I mean, if this is the pushback on the language, we're just making it very clear that it is applicable to the Board of Trustees given. And I'll be quite honest why this language exists. This language exists because in a Southern Nevada school board meeting, we had students testify that were English language learners, and members of the public came in and bullied students, and they were not removed from the meeting. That's why this language exists. This language exists because you have teachers that have come up to testify in public comment that have been followed by parents personally attacking them. That's why this language exists. So that's what the intent of this is just to make it very clear that it's applicable to school boards. That being said, as I have previously stated, this is already consistent with what is in other parts of our statute and applicable to any public meeting. So that's our county commission, our local governments, and our school boards.
So, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. When you said that they're attacking them, is it a physical attack, or is it just verbally?
Personal attack. So because we're talking about willfully disruptive, like,
yeah,
language.
because the willful, because then you have to figure out, somebody has to determine what's willful, right? I think that's what goes back to your question is willful. Who determines
And we're
willful?
getting that definition. Okay. I have just asked for that, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jen Sturm-Gainer, Committee Policy Analyst. I've been in touch with our council and I just wanted to provide the committee with a definition of willfully disruptive, which would mean taking actions with the intention of disrupting the ability of the public body to carry out its meeting in an orderly manner. And thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Jen Sturm-Gainer for the record. Similar language currently exists in the open meeting law, which authorizes the removal of such persons from any public meetings, and that removal would be at the discretion of the chair.
Okay, does that answer everyone's questions? Okay, Senator Neal.
So thank you, Madam Chair, because it seems based on Assemblywoman Torres's comment that you want the board to enforce public-to-public abuse, not necessarily public-to-board abuse. You want the board to trigger or have a duty that you just can't watch students be abused and not remove them, that they now will have a duty for public-to-public contact, abusive behavior to other people speaking at the meeting. And the bill goes beyond that to me.
Assemblywoman Slanatoris for the record. So once again, we took this language out of what it currently exists in our open meeting law statute, and we put that language here. And specifically the part that addresses the concerns that we have is the willfully disruptive of the meeting by being slanderous or offensive, which is the language that we used.
And just really quick, because I think what bothers me is that I know that there is a trustee that had a public meeting, and I'm going to say this in terms of their temperament. They had a public meeting outside of the board that was contentious, and they closed the meeting down because they felt offended. And I was like, well, but you haven't actually met with your constituency since being elected. So of course there were commentary. And so temperament plays into this when you're giving the chair discretion, I think. I get what you're saying. You took it, but I think that this body is very different.
Assemblywoman Torres, for the record, too, and I think that that specific instance applied to a town hall meeting, too, so I don't think it would be applicable to this as well. Although, you know, I mean, like I guess previously said, I think it doesn't, it's not doing anything different. And as I've stated, I mean, if that's the area that's going to give a committee heartburn, I'm happy to continue this conversation. But I do not, in my conversations with our legal counsel as well, I do not believe that this is different than what is current practice in our statutes right now.
If you have further questions, Senator Neal, would you, I'm sure Assemblywoman would be happy to talk to you about that and resolve those issues. And we'll go to Senator Flores.
Thank you. And I'm not asking a question to you, Assemblywoman, but just since we already have our staff going through it, if we could ask our committee attorney if he could just explain presently what would happen if somebody was willfully disruptive during a hearing presently. Because I think we understand that a chair yields tremendous power now, and they can shut people down now. So maybe, I think if we get that on the record, it'll probably alleviate some of the senator's concerns. My question is related, and Madam Chair, if I may ask two. Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question, looking at page 3, section 6 there, line 16, except in an emergency that impacts the school district, you cannot do X, Y, Z. Can you just give me an example what an emergency means? Do we have that defined? Just so that we understand in what scenarios we may be past midnight.
Yes, Assemblywoman Selena Torres, for the record. And so that would be as defined by NRS 241.020. And so that, like, specifically, that's looking at emergencies that impact that area. So when we had this conversation, this is a conversation we had in the Assembly as well, and something that we had amended into the bill specifically for something like COVID. COVID-19 might be an instance where the board has to meet longer. If there's going to be a flood, or if there's going to be something that's going to close down a school, there might be a significant issue, earthquake, any type of natural disaster, state of emergency, determined by that local government. So I think that hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, just so that we could put that on the record, what those scenarios would be. And then my second question, and I think you're saying it, but I just might as well just say it clearly. Do you believe that the board at times has purposefully met at a specific hour, knowing that the meetings would go very long, and they were hoping not to have as much parental participation, student participation, or teacher participation, that it was by design, and that's really what we're trying to get at the end of the day?
Assemblywoman Torres, for the record. So this bill came up in conversation with many stakeholders, including parents and teachers that have wanted to testify on school board meetings, but they're literally running in Southern Nevada until 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning. You know, I often watch the school board meetings in Clark County, and they're running obnoxiously late when members of the public are just no longer able to participate, especially when you have students that wish to testify and participate in the process, but literally have school at 7 in the morning the next day or have to be on a bus by 5 a.m. I mean, I have had this conversation with trustees from Southern Nevada as well as other parts of the state and former trustees. And they assured me that, you know, like this body, when you're a chair of a committee, you have an idea of how long something is going to be. You have an idea that, you know, if I put 5 bills on this agenda today, it's going to be 2 hours or 1 hour. We'll end by 4 or end at 7 p.m., whatever it is. And I have been assured that it is very similar when you're planning school board meetings. And I don't know if it's lack of training and support or if it is intentful. I can't speak to that, but it would appear to me that when it becomes a constant problem, that members of the public are unable to participate and that votes are taken in the middle of the night in an effort to and what appears to be an effort to prevent public participation, that it is intentional, and that we as a legislative body need to prevent our local governments, in this bill specifically school boards, from preventing public access.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have an answer to another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jen Sturm Gainer. For the record, Senator Flores had asked about what would happen presently if someone was willfully disruptive. And in speaking with council, currently the chair of a public body would have the discretion to remove a person from a meeting if their conduct disrupted the ability of the body to carry out its meeting in an orderly manner. The relevant test under the First Amendment is that the chair not discriminate on the basis of the viewpoint or content of the speech, but only on the speech being carried out in a way that prevents the meeting from continuing in an orderly fashion.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, if you want to step back, Assemblywoman Torres, we'll go ahead and take public comment. Anyone in Carson City wishing to give public comment? In support, I might add.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Paul Moratin with the Vegas Chamber. The Chamber is in support of AB 423, and I appreciate the comments that are made by the bill sponsor. As you know, the Chamber, of course, is engaged with our education affairs in Southern Nevada, and the Chamber has seen many times school board meetings go well past midnight before the pandemic and so forth, so it's not a new occurrence. It's been an ongoing issue in our community. And as you heard, you know, it's hard for parents who have to go to work the next morning, students that have to go to school at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. to be engaged in these issues, along with teachers and staff. And we've seen collective bargaining agreements approved after midnight, curriculum issues, evaluations. So it is a genuine concern that these decisions are being made late at night. And many times there are only a few people left in the room when those are being heard. So we do appreciate the bill sponsor's efforts, and we are in support of the bill specifically to Section 6, and appreciate your efforts to move this bill forward, as we do see this as a good governance bill based on common sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in Las Vegas? I see no one. Anyone on the phones, BPS, wishing to speak in favor of Senate Assembly Bill 423? There we go.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the wait. If you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 423, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue now. There are no callers in support at this time.
Okay, anyone in Carson City wishing to speak in opposition? Please proceed when you're ready.
My name is John Eppolito. I'm a parent, former teacher, and with Protect Nevada Children. I've been going to Washoe County School District Board meetings off and on for about 12 years. I'd like to thank Senator Neal for her line of questions. A few things that I thought I could answer. One, I have been at Washoe County School Board meetings when they've run after midnight. And typically what happens is, I believe Senator Flores said, that is where any of the hot issues in Washoe County School District, they're the last issue, and it's the last thing they want to hear, and they're hoping all the parents are gone. So the reason the meetings are so long is because, well, there's a few different reasons, but yes, the hot issues are at the end of the meeting. At the last meeting, there was a parent who had to wait 4 hours to talk about a safety issue in his kid's elementary school. He had to wait till the very end of the meeting because Washoe County School District removed the initial public comments, which I think is a mistake. The meeting before that, a teacher had to wait for over 3 hours to give her public comments about closing her school. That was the only time she could speak. She had to wait over 3 hours. The school districts create the problem. The other thing, so the initial public comments, I think that they should be stricter on what people can do at those meetings, and I think they should bring back the initial public comments. The offensive comments I heard at a Clark County School Board meeting was a mom who got up and started reading her daughter's 9th or 10th grade assignment, and the school board shut her down because it was offensive to the school board. It was very explicit sexual content, and the mom's response was, if this is offensive to you, why are you doing it in my daughter's 9th grade class? And it was part of the lesson. So it's the whole thing. I think the school boards are, well, I don't have a summary. I should just shut up right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Anyone BPS on the phone wishing to speak in opposition?
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to testify in opposition, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue now.
Stacey Rogers for the record. I am absolutely appalled as a parent hearing more and more time and time again that this legislative body is trying to take our rights away from being able to speak, from freedom of speech, our First Amendment right of freedom of speech and expression, away from our communities. Absolutely unacceptable. I am absolutely appalled and oppose this bill. Yet again, here we go. Everybody in this legislative body keeps saying that you're not trying to take parental rights. However, you are. Am I not allowed to say this in a public meeting? This is what you're trying to shut down. You're trying to shut down the parents. I have sat in meeting after meeting in Douglas County, in Carson City, in Washoe County, and I can tell you that room is filled with opposition. And all you're trying to do is to oppress the opposition. Like a true steadfast communist regime. That is exactly what this is. You need to quit. If you are trying to start a war, you are on your way, because this is exactly what happens when you try to silence the majority. I can tell you the majority in every single one of those rooms, 90% of them were in opposition to everything that's been happening with mask mandates, vaccines, and everything else. So when parents come in and they're upset and they want to speak, it's their time. They are allotted, and it is their right to speak out for their families and their children, especially now that you can see it has been proven. And if you are not doing your research and work on what has gone on since 2020, that is your fault. But the parents know, and they fought back, and they were ignored time and time again. Oppose.
Thank you so much. Anyone else BPS?
One more caller, Chair. Stand by. Caller, please press star 6 to unmute. Please proceed.
This is Bruce Parks. For the record, BRUCEPARKS. I'm adamantly opposed to this bill. And I'm very concerned that the sponsor of this bill is more concerned with Southern Nevada than the rest of Nevada. There's a lot more to Nevada than just Clark County. However, having been an advocate for a long time for the citizens of Washoe County and attending not just school board meetings, but various other public body meetings, it has been my experience that the majority of the public bodies are not cognizant of the fact that they serve the public, as has been demonstrated by, well, some of the people of our legislature. They've lost contact with what their purpose is. They are there to serve the people. I've seen it time and time again in Washoe County, how the chairs and presidents of these public bodies do everything they can to suppress the public's right to redress their government with their grievances. The general consensus seems to be what we're trying to do is more important than what you have to say. Nothing could be further from the truth. Simply removing public comment at the beginning of the meetings means that people can no longer schedule when they are able to appear in front of their public body to have their grievances heard. If you have to wait until the end of a meeting and you have no idea how long that meeting's going to last, that's a suppression of your rights. You can call it whatever you want, but that's exactly what it is. And we see this time and time again. And you can file all the open meeting law complaints you want. I have submitted over 15 of them myself, and they're never addressed.
Sir, your 2 minutes is up.
It's unconscionable.
Can you close up your comments?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. BPS, is there anyone else?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, there are no additional callers at this time.
Okay, so we'll open it up for neutral. Anyone in Carson City wishing to speak in neutral? Is there anyone on the phones wishing to speak in neutral?
Chair, there are no callers which to testify.
Thank you so much. And with that, Assemblywoman Torres, would you like to do a closing comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Assemblywoman Selena Torres for the record, and thank you, committee, for hearing this piece of legislation. I just want to put a couple clarifications for the public's sake. Rest assured that this piece of legislation was done in close conjunction with my colleagues in the Assembly side that are from various parts of Nevada, including electeds from Washoe County and electeds from rural Nevada. This was definitely a bipartisan effort, and I think it encompassed a conversation about the entirety of the state of Nevada, not just Southern Nevada, but obviously Southern Nevada is where I'm from. And Southern Nevada is the community that I represent. And so the examples here today were specific to that community. Additionally, I'd like to add on that I think that this legislation encourages and enables the public to participate in the process. And I think it's unfortunate that we have to have this conversation, because I think that all local governments should be making that effort. I'm committed to continuing to work and have this conversation with you all on how we can ensure that public participation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and we appreciate you being here today. And with that, we'll close the hearing on Assembly Bill 423. And we're going to move into public comment. A reminder that public comment, each person is allowed 2 minutes, and we'll start here in Carson City.
My name is John Ippolito. I want to make sure it's very clear. Washoe County School District removed the initial public comments from the agenda.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ippolito. You cannot speak about any bill that we just had hearings on, but you may speak on anything else.
Well, okay, the Washoe County School District removed the initial public comments from the beginning of the agenda. And that's what's created the problem.
You can't talk about that.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
But that is what's created the problem. 2021, Washoe County School District Chief Strategies Officer, and this is about communities and schools. The Chief Strategies Officer from Washoe County School District told the school board right before they voted that communities and schools had full access to everything in Infinite Campus. To me, that's very problematic. Infinite Campus is the most comprehensive and massive database ever created on children in human history. Communities and schools has full access to that. I have a problem with that. Question one, I wasn't clear to me if communities and schools serves every kid in the school or just certain kids. Washoe County School District made it sound like it was only certain kids in the school. I see Edgar nodded his head, so I would not want my kids involved in this because of that data. I do think it's a good program, and I do think it helps kids. Don't get me wrong. It's all about the data. In 2021, the Chief Strategies Officer at Washoe County School District also told the school board that communities and schools does not maintain their own database of Washoe County School District students. Fast forward to 2022, communities and schools parent consent form clearly states that CIS does maintain a student database on students. When the Washoe County School District Chief Strategies Officer learned this, he admitted that he was wrong in 2021. But nothing happens. When he told the board CSI does not maintain their own student database, This is more of an issue with Washoe County School District than with CIS. Personally, again, I would not want any of my kids' data with communities and schools, but most of the kids who need those services, that probably is low on the parents' priority list. I understand that. You can find 1,500 of us at Protect Nevada, on Facebook at Protect Nevada Children. Thank you very much. Sorry.
That's okay. Thanks for being here. Anyone on the phones wishing to give public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers willing to provide public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. And with that, we'll adjourn Senate Education for today, and we'll see you on Friday.